You have tuned in to another episode of The Double Edge Factor. I am your host, Rod Manuel, and peace and blessings unto you. Before we get going, be sure to like, follow, and hit that subscribe button because the more positive interactions you put out there, the more they push this podcast to people who've never heard it before, which will, of course, allow us to have a greater impact on more people around the world. So, if you would do me that favor, I would really, really appreciate it. Today, we're going to jump into something that I see affecting almost everyone I know, including myself at times. It's the idea that our comfort zones are these safe havens, these protected bubbles that shield us from harm. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Your comfort zone doesn't actually keep you safe. It keeps you small. Let's start with what comfort really is. It's not just about being physically comfortable, though that's part of it. Your comfort zone is that psychological space where your activities and behaviors fit like a routine, fit a routine and a pattern that minimizes stress and risk. It's where you feel in control, where outcomes are predictable, where you don't necessarily have to face anxiety and uncertainty. To me, that sounds pretty good, right? And it is to an extent. We all need these type of spaces. They're necessary for our mental health, for processing experiences, for recharging, right? But here's where things get a little complicated. When we mistake temporary relief of comfort for actual safety and security, think about this. Imagine you're on a boat in the middle of a lake. The water's calm, the sun's shining, and you're just out there just chilling, right? It feels safe. It's peaceful, it's serene, right? What you might not notice is while you're just out there chilling, the lake is slowly draining. The water levels are dropping inch by inch. By the time you realize what's happening, you're sitting in the mud, and the boat that you felt safe has now become your personal prison. This is what happens when we confuse comfort for safety. The world around us is constantly changing. Technology evolves, industries transform, relationships grow and shift. And when we as individuals we're kind of meant to grow. But when we resist this change by clinging to our comfort zones, we're not actually protecting ourselves. We're slowly becoming obsolete, irrelevant, or even worse, we're betraying the person we're really meant to become. Let me tell you about a story about Tracy. Tracy worked at the same advertising firm for about 12 years. She was good at her job, really good. I mean, she knew it all, had great relationships with her colleagues, and could practically do her work with her eyes closed. The pay was cool, it was decent, the benefits were solid, and she had job security in an uncertain world. But Tracy had this secret. Every weekend, she would spend hours, just hours and hours, working on her photography. She would wake up before dawn to catch the sunrise, spend entire afternoons editing photos, and even started selling some of her pieces to local businesses. Her friends would just constantly they'd tell her, hey, man, you're pretty talented with that. You should actually pursue this full time. But the thought to her, it terrified her. She'd say things like, what if I fail? What if I don't make enough money? What if I'm not as good as I think I am? And at least at my current job, I know what to expect. So, of course, Tracy stayed. Years passed. Of course, her photography remained just this weekend hobby while her soul slowly died, little by little, each Monday morning when she had to walk back into that familiar office and do the work that she was comfortable with. Now, here's the thing. Tracy thought she was being responsible, practical, and safe. But was she really? Because when she was avoiding the risk of failure in photography, she was guaranteeing her failure of never becoming who she was meant to be. She was avoiding the possibility of short-term financial instability, but ensuring long-term spiritual and creative poverty. And here's where it's going to get real. Her safe job wasn't really even that safe. See, the advertising industry was changing rapidly. Digital transformation was making many traditional advertising roles obsolete. So, of course, companies started hiring freelancers and specialists instead of generalists. By her staying in that comfort zone, Tracy was actually becoming more vulnerable, not less. This brings me to what I like to call a growth paradox. The very thing that we think will keep us safe, staying put, avoiding risk, maintaining that status quo, is actually what makes us most vulnerable in the long run. Consider how muscles work. If you never challenge your muscles, if you never put them under stress, they atrophy. They become weak and brittle. The same is true for our capabilities, our resilience, our adaptability. When we avoid challenges, we don't maintain our strength. We lose it. I kind of had to learn this the hard way in my own life. For years, I would stay in situations that felt comfortable but weren't really serving me. I told myself that I was being wise, that I was waiting for that right time to make those changes. But there's rarely a perfect time for anything significant. And while I was waiting for conditions to be ideal, I was missing opportunities, letting skills just stay stagnant. And most importantly, I was teaching myself that I couldn't handle uncertainty or even a simple challenge. The truth is, every day, every day we choose comfort over growth, we're actually choosing to become less capable, less resilient, and paradoxically, less safe in our ever changing world. So, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do intelligent, capable people, such as yourself, choose to remain small when they could be expanding? The answer lies in how our brains are wired. We have what psychologists call negativity bias. See, we're programmed to focus more on potential threats than potential opportunities. This made sense when we're trying to avoid being eaten by predators, right? But it's less helpful when we're trying to decide whether to start that business or changing careers. Our brains also love predictability. Uncertainty, all it does is trigger responses that create stress, flooding us with cortisol and making us feel anxious. So, when we're faced with the choice between the known and the unknown, even if the known isn't serving us, our brains will often choose the familiar discomfort over the unfamiliar possibility. There's also what researchers call loss aversion. See, loss aversion is when we feel the pain of losing something about twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. So, when we think about leaving our current situation, we focus heavily on what we might lose while under evaluating what we might gain. But here's what I want you to understand. These material patterns serve our ancestors well, but they're not serving us now. In fact, they're keeping us trapped in our lives that are smaller than what we are actually capable of living. And we will be right back. Today's show is brought to you by Polished Custom Builders, where they specialize in building your dream into a reality through custom home building, renovations, and interior design. Check them out at polishedcustombuilders.com, where the most beautiful house in the world is the one that you build yourself. All right, let's define safety for a moment. Real safety isn't about avoiding all risks. It's about being adaptable enough to handle whatever comes your way. It's about having a diverse set of skills, multiple income streams, strong relationships, and most importantly, confidence in your ability to navigate uncertainty. A person who has only ever worked one type of job, lived one place, and surrounded themselves with the same type of people isn't actually safe. They're actually vulnerable. They're like um, they're like a tree that's never been in a storm. When the wind finally comes, and it always does, they don't have the deep roots or the flexible branches to survive it. But someone who regularly pushes themselves out of their comfort zone, who has failed and recovered, who has developed resilience through experiences, that person, that person has real security. Not the false security or predictability, but the genuine security that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws your way. So let's go back to Tracy for a moment. Because here's the thing, her story illustrates something crucial. The real tragedy isn't just that she missed out on potentially fulfilling her career in photography. It's that she never got to find out what she could have become. You see, when we stay in our comfort zone, we don't just miss out on external opportunities. We miss out on discovering parts of ourselves. We never learn how creative we can be under the pressure, how resourceful we can become when we have to figure things out, how much strength we have when we're pushed to the limits. Every person has unrealized potential, capabilities, talents, and strengths that only emerge when they're challenged. But if we never put ourselves in situations that require us to grow, this potential remains forever dormant. And that's a tragedy, if you ask me. Not just for us, but for everyone who would benefit from what we might have created or even contributed. Think about the innovations that have changed the world. They all came from someone who was willing to leave their comfort zone, to risk failure, to venture into that unknown. What if these innovators had chosen just to stick with the safe path instead? What if they had decided to just stay small? See, when we choose to stay in our comfort zones, we don't just limit ourselves, we limit everyone around us. We become examples of settling, of accepting less than what's possible. And even, here's the thing, our children, our friends, our colleagues, they see us as choosing safety over growth. And they learn that this is the acceptable way to live. But when we choose to step outside our comfort zones, to pursue our potential, to risk failure in a service of growth, we give others the permission to do the same. We become the proof that it's possible to change, the possibility of growing, to just become more than what we actually are. You know, I think about the people in my life who inspired me the most, and all had this one thing in common. They were willing to be uncomfortable in service of their growth. They showed me that it was possible to leave the familiar behind and create something new. So, what's the alternative to a comfort zone? Some people call it a growth zone or a learning zone, right? But I'd like to think of it as an action zone. It's the space where we take meaningful steps forward, who we want to become, even when it feels scary. The action zone is where, remember Tracy, this is where Tracy would be if she started taking photography clients on the weekend while still working her day job. It's where she'd be if she had took photography courses, built a portfolio, or even started calling herself a photographer instead of someone who just takes pictures as a hobby. The action zone isn't about making dramatic, life altering changes all at once. It's about consistently choosing growth over comfort, action over inaction, possibility over certainty. All right, here's what I'm going to do. Let me give you some concrete ways to start expanding your comfort zone. This one I say all the time: start small. Start small, but start consistently. If Tracy, who we were talking about earlier, wanted to transition to photography, she didn't need to quit her job tomorrow. She could just start by taking one small photography project at a time. She could say, reach out to one local business about photography needs. She could even attend one networking event for photographers. Small actions taken consistently compound into significant change. The other one, reframe failure as feedback. One of the biggest things keeping us in our comfort zone is the fear of failure. But what if failure wasn't something to be avoided, but rather valuable information about what works and what doesn't work? Every successful person has failed multiple times. The difference is they saw failures as education, not as evidence that they should give up. Another one, build your risk tolerance gradually. Just like you build physical strength by gradually increasing the weight you lift, you can build your tolerance for uncertainty by gradually taking on bigger challenges. Start with low stakes, the ones that are not a big risk, and work your way up. Another one, find your why. Find your why that's bigger than your fear. Tracy's photography wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to capture and share beauty, to help people preserve important memories, to express something that couldn't be expressed in words. When your reason for growing is bigger than your fear of failing, you'll find the courage to take on that action. Here's something I really want you to hear. There will never be a perfect time to leave your comfort zone. There will always be reasons to wait, to prepare more, to gather more resources, to reduce more risk. But while you're waiting for the perfect moment, life is passing you by and your potential is remaining unrealized. The question isn't whether you should leave your comfort zone, it's whether you're willing to accept the cost of staying in it. Because make no mistake, there's always a cost. Every day you choose comfort over growth, you're choosing to remain smaller than you actually could be. And I'm not saying that just to make you feel guilty or to push you into some reckless decisions. I'm saying this because I believe in your potential. I believe you deserve to discover what you're truly capable of. So here's what I want you to do. After this show, I want you to identify one area of your life where you've been playing it safe, where you've been choosing comfort over growth. Maybe it's your career, like Tracy, or maybe it's a relationship that's run its course. Maybe it's a creative project you've been putting off. Maybe it's a skill you've always wanted to develop. Whatever it is, I want you to take one small action today, not tomorrow, not next week. One small action that moves slightly outside your comfort zone in that area. Send that email, make that phone call, sign up for that class, have that conversation, whatever it is. And then I want you to notice how you feel. Not just the anxiety or the fear, that part is normal, but also the excitement, the sense of possibility, the feeling of being alive in a way that comfort will never provide. Your comfort zone isn't keeping you safe, it's keeping you small. And you're meant for more than small. You were meant to grow, to contribute, to discover what you're actually capable of, to live a life that feels expansive rather than constrictive. Yes, leaving your comfort zone involves risk. Yes, you might fail. Yes, you might be a little uncomfortable. But here's what I know for certain: the risk of staying where you are, or of never discovering your potential, of living a smaller life than what you're actually capable of, that risk is far greater than any risk you'll face by growing. The world needs what you have to offer. But first, you need to be willing to discover what that is. And that only happens outside of your comfort zone. Until next time, remember, you're not here to stay safe. You're here to grow, to contribute, and become who you are really meant to be. And that journey starts with a single step outside of your comfort zone. This is Rod Manuel with the Double Edge Factor. And if you found this episode or even a few words value added, share this episode with just one person. The only way we grow this podcast is when you guys share it. The more you share, the greater impact we have on more listeners around the world. So hit that subscribe button to never miss another episode. Or you can find the Double Edge Factor on linktree.com, where you will have access to that email list and all of our social media outlets. And as I always say, be intentional with your words, be intentional with your thoughts, and be intentional with your actions. And always find a way to be a blessing to someone else today.